Well, good morning, Adversity parents. I hope all is well. My name is Brad Lashinsky. I'm the owner of Primetime Sports Performance, and I'm also the guy who programs everything for the Adversity Volleyball Club with regards to their strength and conditioning, plyometrics, speed and agility, and overall methodology of how we strive to do strength and conditioning for your son or daughter. One of the greatest and most important things is to understand kind of how we come up with the programs, what we look for with regards to our testing, and then also talk to you a little bit about overtraining or overreaching syndrome that may occur if proper steps are not taken for your son or daughter with regards to training, rest, and recovery. The program methodology is very simple. We believe in using science as a means to program for your son or daughter and reassess every 6 weeks to adjust the program and move them along the continuum of progressive overload, which is really key into getting stronger, jumping higher, and also our biggest thing is the risk reduction of injury. Remember, we never can really injury prevent. It's impossible to prevent injuries due to many circumstances, one being environment, two being in volleyball specifically is the way we land on maybe somebody's foot or a ball. So there's a lot of factors that play into why injuries do happen. We try to reduce those injuries as much as possible through a 3-stage prep approach, which is assess and assess often, proper plyometric program design, which helps the body get stronger with regards to accepting load and landing, and then finally getting stronger so the body can absorb any tension on the system and also perform volleyball at a high functioning rate. So how do we come up with these programs? Well, first and foremost, what you're looking at on the screen is a survey or an intake survey we do with every athlete that comes through Adversity. Now, this survey is, wouldn't say it's long in nature. There's about 12 to 15 questions. But we go into some very detailed things in which when we get the data and we call scrubbing the data and creating themes about the teams in which they're at, we get a pretty good idea of who your athletes are, or sons and daughters are as athletes, and who they are as people, which is really, really important. So some of the questions: do you want to play in college? Have you committed to a college? What sports do you play? If it's multiple, what are your goals in the sports? How many years have you played your sport? How many years have you lifted or trained? And these two right here are pretty significant into what we look at. We know that there's sport playing age, right? How many years you've played volleyball versus training age. How many years you've lifted or done sports performance. And that's a really important thing because as we go into the methodology, there's really 3 tiers of programs that we create. There's tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. Tier 1 are for those athletes that have never lifted before, have never been exposed to a full-on sports performance program or strength and conditioning program. Tier 2 is kind of that intermediate athlete. They may have 1 year of training, or maybe they've been with us for 2 years. They're going to start in that intermediate phase. And then 3 is going to be our advanced athletes, or those who have already committed to college, have trained for 2+ years, are very familiar with weight training and being in that kind of culture. And we'll start them in there. And we'll get to that program methodology in 1 minute. But we go into a detailed assessment, like I said, of who they are as people, who they are as athletes, and kind of where their goals are, right? Where do you want to do for a living after college? What is one of your weaknesses you have? What is a strength you have? We really try to help them self-identify some strengths and weaknesses that really helps them understand who they are as an athlete, who they are as a person. Because again, while we have them for a couple hours a week, we don't just want to train them and send them home. We want to make sure that they're okay as people, that they're mentally doing okay, especially during this time with COVID, where we see an increase in depression, an increase of some mental health issues. We want to try to mitigate that as much as possible. Catch those signs. If we see those signs, report those to the coaches and to you as parents, because it's really important. Me being a father, I would want nothing less than that for my child as well. So let's move on to the second stage of how we assess the athletes, okay? Here is our assessment protocol. We have a lot of cool technology in which we use. We're one of the few companies in the country, really, that use force plates as a parameter for our testing. Force plates are super expensive platforms that the athlete stands on and they jump on, and it gives us about 60 metrics of reading. Now on here, you're not going to see all those 60 metrics because we try to have this as simplified as possible for when we do one of these videos or even when we explain things to the staff, okay? So we do a 3-step approach and we get a total height here, 11'4", 10'7", okay? Then we use a reaction time with pods. So we have this cool light reaction sensors we use to see how reactive the athlete is, how many pods they touched. We use a jump mat as well for our vertical jump purposes, and we have that in inches. And then we look at the right side and left side. And this really gives us an indication of what's called bilateral squat deficit or bilateral deficit. If we're using our single leg less optimally than it should be. We also look at the difference between right side and left side. We want to be within an inch or so of each side. Again, our goal is to reduce the risk of injury, and this is really understanding that. Let me try to find a large discrepancy. Right here. So we have a 12 inch to a 14.2. We know that's a pretty big jump. We're about 1.8 inches difference from right side to left side. So our coaches know then we have to look at this athlete when they're training and make sure that we are incorporating some single leg training, which you see we do within our regards to our program. Then we do some mobility assessments, overhead squat, which looks at ankle, knee, and hip, and the alignment in which the body is structured. We rate those. Those are on a scale of 0 to 3. 0 being unable to do the movement due to pain. 1 is non-functioning movement with no pain. 2 is some slight modifications to the movement with no pain. And 3 is a perfect movement. We use, again, the jump mat again. We look at pull-ups, max pull-ups. We look at broad jumps, so we're looking at horizontal power as well. Push-ups, T-drill, which is another agility assessment. We look at the bench press if applicable. We look at the back squat as applicable as well. We also use the hex deadlift for those novice and intermediate athletes, and this would be more of our advanced athletes. As you can see, the age range of 17 to 18. Okay, we look at our novice or our 14s, our younger kids, and we looked at we did not squat them, right? They're not ready for a squat. So we take all this data and we kind of scrub the athletes in tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3, and we plug them into our Train Heroic app here, okay? So you have Adversity Boys 14U as a separate team, but we have Boys Tier 1, Boys Tier 2, Boys Tier 3. We have Girls Tier 1, Girls Tier 2, Girls Tier 3. These allocations of Sunday, Monday are just days in which they lift. So that's how we put them in. We'll get back to this program in 1 second. All right, let's go back to our actual program methodology, excuse me. So we have an exercise hierarchy or inventory, okay? And this is really key because we know there's 7 to 8 body movements in which we train. Now, some athletes will work out 2 days a week, some will work out 3 days a week. Typically, we're going to do a total body workout, okay? So incorporating some sort of variation of 7 of these movements. So we have the category right here. We have a horizontal push, things like a bench press or push-up. Horizontal pull, which would be some sort of row, okay? We have another pull, which would be some sort of retraction, a face pull, band pull apart. And then we have a vertical pull, okay? So a pull up, okay? A vertical pull again, which could be a pull down, like a lat pull. We have our vertical pushes, which is overhead pressing. We have knee dominant, which is single leg movements like a lunge. We have a hinge, which would be some of our squatting, some of our hamstring work. Total body, kettlebell swings, total body. Here you see some variations. Then we have hip dominant, which would be our squats and hip lifts. Again, you see some variations, right? You see 1, 2, 3 horizontal pushes. That's because we use 3 different exercises. Our movement goal is to get them eventually to a bench press. But here's our phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4. So it takes them 4 phases or somewhere between 12 and 16 weeks just to touch a bar for a bench press if they're considered a novice or beginning athlete. We have incline bench as another movement goal that we want to get them to. And again, we see 4 phases until they get to this actual incline bench. Then we have push-up is our other horizontal push that we do work on. Horizontal pulls, we have 4 horizontal pulls. We have some sort of row movement. We have that retraction movement I talked about, another retraction movement, and then we have a TRX rower suspension trainer in which we have at the facility. We have vertical pulls as well, 2 vertical pulls. We have 1 vertical push. We don't do tons of overhead lifting. We don't believe in doing crazy amounts of overhead lifting due to them either lifting prior to practice or lifting after practice. So we know that a volleyball athlete specifically has a lot of overhead motion to it. So we don't want to overly exert them in those ways. We have 2 knee dominant movements. One is a rear foot elevated split squat as the goal movement. But again, that takes quite a long, it takes 6 phases to get to that actual point. Then we have a lateral lunge as well. And then we have those squatting and single leg movements down there. Here's our novice methodology. So our novice methodology really utilizes what's called linear periodization, okay? And all that means is progressive overload. Over time, we're going to hit these 4 factors of body qualities, okay? We have hypertrophy, which is generally 8 to 20 reps, which is higher rep, which is building on muscle, okay? And then we move over to base strength, which is getting a little bit stronger. We're working into that 5 to 8 rep range. Then we have explosive strength. So we're going to be a little faster within what we do and be explosive in the movements in which we ask them to perform. That's going to be hovering around 2 to 5 reps. And then we're looking at power. And power simply means how fast we can move the bar with regards to weight. So it's overcoming inertia. If you want to equate that to volleyball, think of overcoming inertia when your athlete or your son or daughter is doing a block jump, or overcoming inertia when they're doing an arm swing or an attack on the right side, okay? It's being as fast as possible, elevating, overcoming inertia so we can be explosive. And all these qualities that we work on in these phases really lead up to this power development, okay? One, we can't have a lot of strength if we don't have muscle in order to get the strength from. So that's why it's called progressive overload. This arrow represents the increase in intensity and technique. And if we drew an arrow going this way, we would see a decrease in volume, right? Because like I said, over here we have 2 to 5 reps, and here we have 1 to 4 reps, but over here we have 8 to 20. So we have a higher volume or a higher call for reps in order to increase muscle size. We don't need that when we're focusing on power. Our intermediate and advanced athletes do what's called an undulating periodization, okay? And this program generally is, like I said, 2 to 3 days. And what we're doing is we're going to weave through the other qualities that we talked about in the novice one, okay? So we see this is a straight line. This one's a wavy line. So day 1, we might work on strength. Day 2, we might work on power. Day 3, we might work on that muscle building. The reason why we can do this and manipulate this program that way is because these intermediate and advanced athletes have some training background. It goes back to that first assessment we did and that survey we did, matched with that awesome assessment protocol we use where we get all cool with the technology. Those 2 combined allows us to drop them into either the novice or the intermediate and advanced. And I also should warn that if they're not handling this well, if we see a drop, and we'll get to overreaching, overtraining stuff in a second, if we see an overall drop in performance, we'll reduce them and bring them back to a tier, okay? Here's the program methodology when looking at a day of strength training. Colors represent exercise selections you have. Novice may start in progressions 1 through 3, intermediate 3 through 5, and advanced 5+. Again, that goes back to our exercise inventory, okay? Phase 1, 2, and 3, intermediate, 4, 5 for, 1, 2, 3 for novice, 4, 5 for intermediate, 5+ for advanced, okay? And then we color code them, and we understand the sets and the reps as well. A1, A2 represents what's called a superset. So we'll do a total body movement and we'll do a mobility movement right afterwards. Again, none of these things are carried out for a long period of time. We generally have 25 to 30 minutes of lifting in the weight room. And we're only looking at 1, 2, 3, for 5 exercises within the realm of that exercise inventory. The rest of the stuff is working on mobility, a carry, which is a core exercise, and then just some fun bicep stuff if we have time, okay? But the color-coded ones are really the only exercises we're doing with regards to the exercise inventory. And you can see I color-code them based off of where they're at in this hierarchy of exercises, okay? Day 2, again, same thing, and then day 3, same thing. We're really try to be mindful of making sure there's enough rest time in between exercises where they're not getting hammered in the weight room and being exhausted. Yes, they're going to work hard. Yes, it's going to be intense, but I don't want them overtraining or overreaching. And again, we'll get to that in a second. One of our most important things are the plyometric programs in which we do. There are 4 phases to our plyometric, okay? And there's 3 days, and they're rotating days. And we really believe in building up tissue tenacity or tensity, which is getting stronger tissues, tendons, and ligaments in order to absorb landing. Again, injury risk reduction, not injury risk prevention, okay? Huge thing to understand. If anybody's telling you that there's a prevention of injury, it's impossible, okay? So we really understand that as scientists. We really understand that as practitioners. I myself have a PhD in human performance, and what we do and what we understand is all this research and all this stuff with regards to injury and injury prevention doesn't exist. You can't prevent that injury due to those mitigating factors I mentioned before: environment, surroundings of people, how we're reacting to sport, and then ultimately it's the fast decisions and innate decisions made by the athlete that could result in injury. Okay, so our 4 phases of plyos, we believe in starting with a non-counter movement, all right, and then moving into counter movement with a hop, and then a full plyometric program. All that means is the non-counter movement is we're not using momentum in order to jump. Okay, so things like depth jumps where we're jumping off of a 12-inch box and holding the bottom position is building up that tissue, building up those tendons and ligaments to absorb jumping in phase 4. If we look at phase 4, we have counter movement hurdle hop to a single leg box jump. Pretty darn advanced, and that takes 16 to 20 weeks to get to this point. Nobody starts in phase 4. All athletes, regardless if they're intermediate, advanced, or novice, start on the same phase of plyometrics. It's really important because we're teaching landing mechanics and teaching the ability to be explosive, okay? And you might be asking yourself, why is that different than starting them off in the strength training? Because there's not a lot of movement with regards to strength training, progressions, and the body remembers strength training a lot more easier than it will remember the ability to jump, move, and be quick and explosive. So when we have athletes that take 4 to 6 weeks off after a club season or after a high school season, everybody starts back at phase 1, day 1. And they all progress together, no matter if they're tier 1, 2, or 3 at the end of the plyometrics, okay? So that covers our methodology. That covers our exercise inventory. That covers our program methodology for both novice, intermediate, and advanced. I've covered also this unbelievable plyometric program we believe that really works. We average about a 2-inch vertical every 4 to 6 weeks, okay? What I do want to show you real fast is the warm-up. Let me try to find the warm-up here. See if I could find the warm-up that we've been using for you guys. All right, so let me pause this and I will be back. We're getting that warm-up for you guys. Here is the warm-up for adversity. And so we believe in using the RAMP protocol, okay? And the RAMP protocol is really designated by the National Strength and Conditioning Association, which I'm a proud member of and all of our staff are proud members of. And it really looks at a couple things. R, all right, stands for raising the blood pressure, raising the heart rate. We want to make sure that we're warming the system up. A is for activation. We want to activate the muscles in which they are going to be used. M is going to be mobilized. We want to have some good mobility. And then P is potentiate. What we want to do is ramp up the central nervous system to get to these plyos, okay? So when elongating is doing some foam rolling, some glute stretching. We go then to mobilize. We're going to mobilize and get mobile in the ankles, hips, and upper back. We're going to activate those muscles doing leg lowers, dead bugs, and glute band series. So we're getting those muscles firing. Our dynamic warm-up, we're going to raise that blood pressure up and heart rate up. Not blood pressure, heart rate up, and we're going to get them acclimated to the environment. And then the central nervous system activation, also known as potentiation, activates the CNS and prepares them for those plyometrics that they're going to be hitting that we already went through, and then prepares them for that lift that they're going to be taking place. If they're doing this warm-up prior to a game, a match, or practice, they're going to be really ready to go with regards to volleyball and what they're doing in practice. Okay, so that is the warm-up, very detailed, 10 to 15 minutes. Every athlete goes through this. Every athlete has their own band. And it's very, very strict in making sure that they do these things correctly. Again, helping with injury risk reduction and not injury prevention. All right, so what I'm going to do now is show you what these programs look like inside the app that they all have access to. So let's go to Volleyball Boys Tier 1. Okay, whoop, little connection issue here. Let me reconnect. Okay, here we go. All right, so we're going to hop on here. All right, and here's your Tier 1 for boys volleyball. And you can see that we're doing a total body movement, a retraction movement, dumbbell bench press, TRX row, standing curl press, and a negative push-up and a negative pull-up and a push-up. Now, remember, this is phase 2 now. If we would go back to October, we're going to see a rack pull here and not a clean pull. So phase 1 was a rack pull, and then phase 2 was a clean pull. So you see, we're using that exercise selection area right here, in which we're going right down the actual list of the progressions. Again, they'll be starting in phase 1. Here's that total body, rack pull, okay? And then KB swing is also a phase 1, which you will see right here, Russian kettlebell swing. And then a high pull is also phase 1. So we're adhering to the hierarchy of principles of our exercise selection. Okay, so let's talk about now overreaching and overtraining and some signs and symptoms you should be aware if your son or daughter is not feeling well, not feeling like they're getting some out of it, or tired oftentimes. Well, Hans Seeley is the godfather of what's called overtraining, overreaching syndrome, okay? And I'm going to give you a kind of a cool little introduction to this, all right? There's 3 things that really happen when we introduce an athlete to strength and conditioning. There's the alarm reaction stage, there's the resistance stage, and then there's the exhaustion stage, okay? So this baseline I'm going to use as a vertical jump when we do our assessments, okay? Say this vertical jump is 24 inches, all right? Not a bad jump. Say the athlete's 15 years old. Pretty good jump, jumping about 2 feet. Right here, the alarm reaction is we're introducing or acclimating them to some resistance training and plyos, and you're going to see them dip down. If I would retest this same athlete a week into the program, you might see a decrease in vertical jump. We might see a 22, a 23. And you may be asking, well, if I'm introducing resistance and I'm introducing all these great things you talked about in your methodology, why would they decrease? The body has to acclimate, okay, accumulate to that resistance. And what that does is that sends, when I introduce resistance training or jumping or some sort of stressor to the body sounds off an alarm and says, oh boy, I got to react to this. And the reaction by the system or the body is to adapt to the soreness, adapt to the hydrogen ions inside the body that's trying to fight this resistance. But eventually it does adapt. Now it does adapt, and it takes about 2 to 5 weeks, depending on the athlete, to go into the next stage, which is the resistance stage, okay? So you have to accumulate or acclimate. We transition or transmutate to what's called the resistance stage. And this is after 4 to 6 weeks, again, or 2 to 6 weeks. And the reason why it takes so long is because the body adapts neurologically first, okay? Any adaptation of strength training, no matter how advanced you are, is going to be neurological when a new stressor is taking place. So that takes some time for the body to adapt from the central nervous system, their neurological system, then eventually the body system, where we see that increase in vertical jump. So here we are with a phase. Imagine this area is 2 to 6 weeks long. We introduce this baseline test, which is, say, a 24-inch vertical. We train them. We don't test them till 4 to 6 weeks. And over here in the realization phase, we should have what's called supercompensation, where now this might be around a 26-inch vertical. Again, we said every 4 to 6 weeks, we see around a 2-inch vertical increase with the athletes. And that's what's called supercompensation. And what we do is we try to repeat this every 4 to 6 weeks. We come down. We introduce a new stressor here. We're going to dip and come up. Now, what this third stage is called is exhaustion. And this is what we don't want to see. So you don't really go into overtraining. Overtraining is very much misused as a word that connotates with bad training or tired athlete. You will go into a phase called overreaching, okay? And overreaching is a syndrome in which there's not enough recovery, not enough rest, poor nutrition, poor sleep, and then a lack of interest or something that's going on mentally with the athlete. Very rare does this happen, but overreaching is a good signal of overreaching is if we test this athlete right here and we still see them not compensating a little bit, if we see a decrease in vertical, say again it's 24, and we go and we add the resistance, and when we test them here 4 to 6 weeks later and they're at a 22, we know that they're in an overreaching syndrome, okay? Now, yes, it could be a bad test day, so we might test them the next day just to see what it was. But we know that we have to mitigate and make sure they're getting proper rest. The way it gets to overtraining is if you don't assess and if you don't realize, then it continues. And overtraining can take months for people to overcome. I've never, in my 15 years of being a strength coach, I very rarely have seen overtraining happen, specifically in the private sector, specifically with being around good quality coaches. Okay, so you really don't have to worry about overtraining syndrome as much as you have to worry about possibly overreaching. With that being said, it's up to our coaching staff, your coaching staff with Adversity Volleyball, and you being a parent to make sure that they're resting, that they're eating properly, that they're still enjoying, volleyball, enjoying the process of becoming a very high quality volleyball player. This is a very, very quality club. They strive to perfect you as a volleyball player, keeping in mind that you're still a 14 to 18-year-old person that have a lot of stuff going on, especially with this COVID. But I just want to address this. If properly done and utilizing the methodologies that I laid out before you with regards to linear periodization for those novice athletes, intermediate and advanced with an undulating, proper program methodology with regards to lifting, proper plyometric sequencing, and then utilizing our own inventory of exercises along with the proper sets and reps and volume, we will not see anybody get into this overreaching syndrome, okay? So I just wanted to shoot a video for you guys to introduce you to the program, get a little bit more nerdy on you guys with science and how we program things, what we look at as far as how we program things to make sure that you're comfortable with how we're working with your son or daughter. It is a true pleasure to be with Adversity as the company, has strived to partner with like-minded in our mission statement to really provide evidence-based strength and conditioning while making it fun, making it a culture of enjoyment, and understanding that we've all been ex-college athletes, everybody on our staff. I played college football, baseball. Mo played volleyball. He also managed Lewis volleyball. Eric played collegiate volleyball. Isabel played volleyball. Jonathan played collegiate volleyball. We understand what it takes to get to the next level. And our job is really to help you through that with having fun, but giving you the proper evidence-based researched programs, making sure we're up to date with regards to assessments, making sure you're always super compensating, right? Going above that baseline each time you test. But more importantly, understanding that exercise is not just a mode to become a better athlete, it's also lifelong, right? We're trying to teach your son or daughter that exercise, while tough, right, especially when you're preparing for sport, is tough, but it's also enjoyable. It's something they can continue throughout their life and really help with the longevity of themselves as human beings. I appreciate your time. I hope you enjoyed this long video. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate. I not only own and run and operate the programming and the coaches for Primetime Sports Performance, I'm also a full-time professor over at St. Xavier University where I run the exercise science program, our science and theory of coaching program, and our sports and fitness administration program. So if you need to reach me, I'll give you 2 email addresses, bradleshinske@gmail.com, or my university address, leshinske@sxu.edu. If you have any questions, concerns, if you want me to dive a little bit more on a phone call with you about the science and the research that we do, let me know. I invite anyone to ever come up to the facility and watch the assessments. Ask our head coach, Mo, who does a phenomenal job. He's the director of volleyball performance. He does a phenomenal job with managing these 500, 600 athletes, an unbelievable job. He'll push your son or daughter in the right way, but he also understands that they're human beings and that we're empathetic to that. We are compassionate to that. We understand all the stuff that is going on with regards to COVID and the pressure of being a high school athlete in these trying times. So I hope everybody's healthy. I hope everybody's safe. You take care of yourself. Again, if you have any questions, concerns, or comments, please feel free to hit me up on an email, and I'd love to talk to you. Thank you for allowing us to train your son or daughter. It's been a true honor and pleasure watching them grow, not only as volleyball athletes, but also as people. And we take pride and honor in working with Melissa and Kyle and their whole staff. Thank you so much. Have a great day.